A month after arriving in Uruguay, Jaime finally came back. But what he brought with him wasn't just information about players. The report covered coaches, club presidents, business owners, political connections, relationships between clubs, who controlled influence behind the scenes. And the more I read, the more I realized this was becoming something much bigger than football. And one thing became very clear almost immediately. The people running these clubs were thinking several moves ahead too. It was late July when Jaime finally returned from Uruguay. He had spent almost a month there, watching, listening, asking questions. By then, the rumors had already spread further than I ever expected. Club presidents were talking, coaches were talking, people who had never met me were discussing what they thought I was doing. But I still didn't know what was really happening behind the scenes. Jaime did. When he walked into my office carrying a thick folder under his arm, I knew he hadn't come back with player recommendations. He had come back with answers. At least, that was what I hoped. We sat down and started talking. For hours, not about football, not at first. About people. Who knew who trusted who influenced decisions, who everyone listened to when something important happened. The more he spoke, the more I realized I had been looking at Uruguay the wrong way. I thought I was studying clubs. Jaime had been studying the people behind them. And suddenly, the whole picture started to look very different. What he brought back wasn't a scouting report. It was something far more valuable. A map, not of places, of relationships. That night, after Jaime left, I stayed in the office long after everyone else had gone home. The report sat open on my desk, page after page, notes, observations, conversations, things that didn't seem important on their own, but became very important when you started connecting them together. At first, I looked for players. That had always been the objective. Find talent, build relationships, create opportunities. But the more I read, the less interested I became in the players themselves. The real story was happening around them. Every club had its own politics, its own alliances, its own rivalries. Some presidents were respected because of what they had built, others because of who they knew. Some seemed to have influence far beyond their own clubs. Others appeared to be little more than caretakers, trying to keep their organizations alive from one month to the next. What surprised me most was how connected everything seemed to be. A coach at one club knew a president at another. A businessman helped fund a team in one neighborhood while advising a different club across the city. People moved between organizations. Relationships overlapped. Nothing existed in isolation. The clubs weren't competing inside separate worlds. They were all operating inside the same one. The more I read, the more I realized that success in Uruguay wasn't just about identifying talented players. It was about understanding the people who influenced where those players eventually ended up. That was the information I couldn't find online. That was the information no scouting report could give me. And now, for the first time, I had a glimpse of it. Not the whole picture, just enough to realize how much I still didn't know. Over the next week, Jaime and I met several more times. Sometimes at my office, sometimes at a small cafe a few blocks away. The report answered a lot of questions, but it also created new ones. I wanted to understand what all of it meant. Not just the information itself, the people behind it, the motivations, the things that never appear in a report. As we talked, I kept returning to the same subject. The club presidents. Who could be trusted? Who couldn't? Who actually influenced decisions? And who only appeared to? Jaime would answer my questions, but often his answers weren't what I expected. Sometimes he would tell me that I was focusing on the wrong thing. Other times he would simply laugh. Not because the questions were bad, because they were the kinds of questions an outsider would ask. I was trying to make everything fit into a system I already understood. A system based on business, contracts, incentives, negotiations. But football wasn't always like that, and neither were the people involved in it. A few days before he left Chicago, we met one last time. We talked for nearly 2 hours. When the conversation ended, we stood outside the cafe and shook hands. Then, Jaime smiled. Not a confident smile. Not a warning either. Something in between. And before he walked away, he said something that stayed with me. "Over there, they don't think the same way you do." Then he left. I stood there for a moment, watching him disappear down the street, trying to decide whether those words were supposed to encourage me or worry me. 1 week after my last meeting with Jaime, I made the call. I contacted the club president and told him I would be available to travel in a couple of weeks. If they were still interested in meeting, we could coordinate our schedules. The response came almost immediately. There was no hesitation, no discussion, no need to check with anyone else. The meeting was set. That surprised me. For months, I had struggled to get people to return a phone call. Now, a date was being arranged within minutes. That told me everything I needed to know. They wanted this meeting just as much as I did. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing, reviewing Jaime's notes, studying club presidents, rereading player reports, and thinking through every possible direction the conversation could take. The more I prepared, the more one question stayed in my mind. Why were they suddenly so eager to meet? I would find out soon enough.